Representative Jasmine Crockett's argument with FBI Director Kash Patel wasn't just a fiery takedown, it was a necessary moment of truth-telling in a political environment where facts are constantly being distorted and accountability is treated like an inconvenience. Crockett called out what many Americans, especially marginalized communities, have been feeling for years: the erosion of trust in institutions that are supposed to protect us, and the growing concern that those institutions are being weaponized for political loyalty instead of public safety.
Now, I will agree that I definitely take issue with a number of decisions that Donald Trump makes, especially when it comes to the people that he decides to appoint to very important positions, including this one, because I did have to make sure that I wasn't going crazy. But when I say that you are the least qualified FBI director in the history of the FBI, that is real, because you are the only one that never even served with the FBI prior to joining, yet we are supposed to believe that you are the greatest thing since sliced bread. I didn't ask you a question. Now, what I want to go through is to talk about why you are a failure and why, honestly, we just need to tell you bye-bye. I know that you got a little upset and you put on your show for your boss because it seems like you're trying to save your job when it came to talking to Senator Booker yesterday. But let's go through some of your failures. So before you were even confirmed, and I think one of my colleague from Georgia, pointed out that you were already targeting career officials so that you could direct illegal firings. Mind you, these cases that you were so upset about, which are the ones tied to Trump, the cases came through his handpicked FBI director. And frankly, when people sit around and say things like, oh, you know, we're happy because now we feel safe, I don't know who feels safe in this country except for the white supremacists, because I specifically as a black woman definitely don't feel safe. And frankly, my colleagues have been real nice to you today, and I applaud them, but I don't have the same demeanor because I know that multiple colleagues on this side of the aisle have faced death threats. In fact, somebody tried to kill one of my colleagues, and frankly, I don't know if this FBI or under your leadership, if those people would have been caught. I don't have any confidence in you. And if we start talking about the reasons that I lack confidence, we could start with you not just wanting to acknowledge some simple facts. Simple facts like the vast majority of the threats are coming from right-wing extremism. And I know my colleagues have tried to stress this, but I decided that I would maybe do it in a different way. Number one, I have a couple of UCs. Kim Buck, one of multiple Republicans receiving death threats for voting against Jim Jordan as House Speaker.
Without objection.
Another one, Republican lawmaker says she received death threats after voting against Jim Jordan in Speaker's race.
Without objection.
In addition, there was another one from another colleague who now is leaving Congress because they said that they were calling his wife anonymously and threatening her life to the extent that she ended up sleeping with a firearm.
Without objection.
Okay, so here's the deal. How are we supposed to have confidence when you're sitting up here telling the Senate yesterday that it will take you 14 years before you can get the FBI fully staffed to do their jobs? You're also now redirecting resources so that they can go and play ICE agents on the streets. You're getting rid of your most qualified people. And even when it came down to somebody that you consider to be a friend, you were posted up having some fancy dinner to the extent that you posted not only once erroneously, you posted twice erroneously as it relates to catching somebody, and then you want to go and say, let me take a victory lap, because honestly, if it wasn't for parents deciding that they were going to turn in their child, it seems like y'all wouldn't have got there, even though he literally confessed online. So I'm confused about what it is that the FBI is doing except for trying to put on a show for the apprentice or whatever you want to call him. The day after all of this took place, there was domestic terrorism that was taking place at HBCUs. They were targeted. Yet I didn't hear anything from the FBI about what was going on. And again, black people kept saying, how did we end up in this? Because the numbers are so very clear that white supremacy is a problem. And honestly, I've not heard anything out of you today that makes me believe that you're going to do anything about the white supremacy problem, the one that is leading to children being killed, children being shot, as well as members of their community as they're worshiping in their churches.
The time of the gentlelady has expired.
Her opening point is critical. Donald Trump appointed Christopher Wray as FBI director, and even that appointment raised eyebrows considering Trump's long history of valuing loyalty over competence. But what Crockett highlights about Kash Patel being the least qualified FBI director in history is not simply an insult, it's a fact rooted in precedent. Every previous FBI director had a background of extensive service within the Bureau or substantial federal law enforcement experience. Patel is the first in history to step into this role without ever having served a single day in the FBI before leading it. That should matter to everyone, regardless of party, because leading a national security agency is not a job you learn on the fly. The stakes are too high, and Americans deserve leaders chosen for their expertise, not their political usefulness. Crockett also touches on something deeper: the shifting priorities inside the FBI under Patel's leadership. When she questions why he seems unable or unwilling to acknowledge that the vast majority of domestic extremist threats come from the far right, she's pointing to data, years' worth of it, documented by the FBI, DHS, and independent research organizations. White supremacist violence has consistently ranked as the greatest domestic security threat in this country, and yet Patel refuses to say this out loud. That's not neutrality, that is willful denial. That is political protectionism at the expense of public safety. She also reminds us that far-right violence doesn't only target communities of color or religious minorities, it increasingly targets Republican lawmakers who don't fall in line. Members of Congress receiving death threats, colleagues sleeping with firearms by their beds because they're afraid for their lives, lawmakers quitting Congress altogether out of fear for their families. These are not abstract talking points. These are real examples of how extremist rhetoric, especially from the MAGA wing, translates directly into violence. Even Republicans who vote against Trump's preferred outcomes are now targets. That should tell everyone just how dangerous this moment is. Crockett then goes deeper into the operational failures she sees within Patel's leadership. An understaffed FBI projected to take 14 years to rebuild, senior officials pushed out, and agents diverted from major cases to serve political agendas. And she highlights Patel's attempt to take victory laps for arrests that only happened because the parents of the suspect turned in their own child. Instead of owning failures, he performs for political cameras, which is why she references his attempts to impress Trump and senators the day before. It's a damning point. Leadership isn't about theatrics, it's about competence, and Crockett is clearly seeing none. But perhaps the most devastating part of her statement is when she speaks as a black woman. She says she does not feel safe in America right now, and she's not alone. The communities most targeted by white supremacist violence are black communities, Jewish communities, Muslim communities, Latino communities, Asian communities, and LGBTQ communities. When HBCUs were targeted by domestic terror threats the day after Patel's public performance, she heard nothing from the FBI. Silence has consequences. Silence communicates priorities. Silence sends a message to extremists that their threats can go unanswered. And while Republicans on the committee mocked Crockett's passion, calling it theatrics and clickbait auditions, they completely ignored the substance. They ignored the real stories of real people who have been threatened, harmed, or killed. They ignored the rising tide of extremism. They ignored the documented failures of Patel's leadership. Instead, they praised him because he aligns with their political narrative, because he says what Trump wants to hear, and because results are less important to them than loyalty. But for millions of Americans, including those most often targeted by extremist violence, this is not a performance. This is survival.